The decorated Russian colonel demanded the silent tomb guard salute, an easy command for a man of his power. But he didn't know the guard's silent vow was forged in a fire that had once saved the colonel's own life. The air outside the National Archives Museum was a thick, humid blanket, the kind of Washington, D.C. summer day that made stones sweat. The marble plaza shimmered under the oppressive sun, reflecting the stoic grandeur of the building that housed America's founding documents. A low, powerful hum vibrated through the air, the sound of armored diplomatic sedans, their dark-tinted windows hiding the faces of the world's most powerful military figures. They had gathered for the Global Defense Symposium, a high-stakes chess match of policy and posturing. Amidst this sea of controlled chaos and transient power, one figure was an anchor of permanence. Specialist Liam Johnson stood guard, a silent sentinel. At 30, he had a lean, wiry strength, his face seemingly carved from the same Appalachian rock as his ancestors. His eyes, the color of a winter sky, were fixed in the 1,000-yard stare that was the hallmark of his duty. He was a tomb guard of the 3rd U.S. Infantry Regiment, the Old Guard, the Army's most prestigious ceremonial unit. Today, however, his post was not the hallowed ground of Arlington, but this temporary, high-profile, diplomatic stage. His dress uniform was a masterpiece of precision, jet black, with creases so sharp they could cut glass. The silver medals on his chest gleamed, each one a story of service, including a tour in Afghanistan that had etched invisible scars onto his soul. He stood perfectly still, his M14 rifle held with a practiced ease that belied its weight. His posture was a testament to thousands of hours of training, a living monument to discipline and duty. He didn't feel the trickle of sweat tracing a path down his spine. He didn't hear the cacophony of Russian, German, and Mandarin swirling around him. His mind was a fortress, locked on the singular purpose of his watch. Yet, memories were ghosts that respected no fortress walls. A flicker, unbidden, the dusty haze of Kandahar, the shared laughter with his friend, Sergeant Ben Miller, over a lukewarm can of soda just hours before the ambush. Then, with his easy grin and unwavering loyalty, that memory was the fuel for Liam's silent vow. The reason he had volunteered for this demanding duty upon his return. He wasn't just guarding a post, he was guarding a promise. He was standing for Ben, and for all the others who never came home. A sleek, black Zill limousine crunched to a halt at the edge of the plaza. The doors opened, and out stepped the Russian delegation. Leading them was Colonel Dmitry Volkov. A man in his late 40s, Volkov was built like a bear, broad and imposing, yet he moved with a predator's grace. His uniform was heavy with medals that spoke of brutal campaigns in Chechnya and Aleppo. A pale, arcing scar over his right eyebrow gave his already sharp, intelligent eyes a perpetually dangerous glint. He scanned the scene not with curiosity, but with the dismissive air of a man who believed true strength was forged only in the mud and blood of actual combat, not in polished ceremonies. His gaze swept past the American flags, the crisp salutes of the welcoming detail, and then it landed on Liam. He stopped. His aides, accustomed to his abruptness, halted behind him. Volkov tilted his head, a faint, condescending smirk playing on his lips as he studied the unmoving American soldier. Lubopitno, he muttered to his adjutant. Curious. They dressed their soldiers like porcelain dolls for a museum. The adjutant chuckled nervously, but Volkov's eyes, cold and assessing, remained locked on Liam. He saw not a man, but a symbol of what he considered American weakness. All show, no substance. With a new, deliberate purpose, he began to walk directly toward the silent guard. The air grew still, the low hum of the city seeming to fade as the storm gathered. As Colonel Volkov approached, a palpable tension rippled through the plaza. Delegates paused their conversations, their eyes drawn to the impending confrontation. Chloe Evans, a young, independent journalist, instinctively raised her small, professional live-streaming rig, the lens focusing tightly on the two figures. She smelled a story, a moment of unscripted drama that could cut through the symposium's monotonous diplomacy. Volkov stopped just beyond the invisible perimeter that protocol dictated around a guard on duty. He circled Liam slowly, like a wolf inspecting a trap, his polished black boots echoing on the marble. "A living statue," he said, his English heavily accented, but clear and loud enough for those nearby to hear. "In Russia, our soldiers are made of steel and fire, not stone. They act. They command respect." He paused, waiting for a reaction that never came. Liam's eyes remained fixed on a point somewhere beyond the horizon, his expression a mask of serene indifference. Inside Liam, however, a switch had been flipped. His training took over, a cold, calm wave washing over the flicker of annoyance. He'd dealt with hecklers at Arlington, tourists who tried to make him laugh, to make him flinch. But this was different. This was a high-ranking foreign officer, and his words were not a casual taunt, but a deliberate challenge to his uniform, his country, and his purpose. He tightened his grip on his rifle, the familiar weight a grounding force. For Ben, he thought, stand for him. From across the plaza, Major Isabella Diaz watched the scene unfold with growing unease. Fluent in Russian and an expert in de-escalating diplomatic incidents, her instinct screamed at her to intervene. She caught the eye of a man standing near the museum entrance, General Marcus Reed, retired. A living legend in the old guard, Reed was there as a consultant, but his presence still commanded immense respect. His silver hair shone in the sun, his posture as ramrod straight as it was 40 years ago. He gave Diaz a subtle, almost imperceptible shake of his head. "Wait, let's see his play." Volkov, emboldened by the lack of response, stepped closer still. "Tell me, soldier," he sneered, his voice dripping with condescension. "Can you even hear me? Or does the uniform come with plugs for your ears, so you don't have to listen to the real world?" His aide snickered. A few onlookers shifted uncomfortably. Major Diaz began to move forward, unable to stand by any longer, but Volkov raised his hand, halting her in her tracks without even looking at her. His focus was entirely on Liam. "I am Colonel Dmitry Volkov of the Russian Armed Forces," he announced, his voice booming across the plaza. "I have led men through hells you only see in your Hollywood movies. In my country, a soldier shows respect to a superior officer, regardless of the flag they serve." He straightened to his full, imposing height. "I command you to salute me," he barked, the words cracking like a whip. He then demonstrated, snapping his own hand up in a crisp, palm-forward Russian salute. "Now!" The demand hung in the thick, humid air. Chloe Evans's camera was steady, capturing the beads of sweat on Volkov's temple and the absolute, unnerving stillness of the American Guard. The plaza fell silent. Every diplomat, every aide, every tourist held their breath. They were no longer just spectators at a symposium. They were witnesses. A line had been drawn on the sun-baked marble, a challenge issued not just to one soldier, but to the very institution he represented. And the world was watching to see if he would break. Seconds stretched into an eternity. Liam Johnson did not move. He didn't blink. He didn't breathe, it seemed. His stillness was not passive. It was an act of defiance, a wall of discipline against which Volkov's authority shattered. The Russian colonel's face, already flushed from the heat, darkened to a dangerous shade of crimson. The public refusal, the silent rebuke in front of his peers and subordinates, was an intolerable humiliation. "You dare," he hissed, the word a low growl. "You insult me. You insult Russia." Major Diaz rushed forward, her professionalism a stark contrast to Volkov's raw fury. "Colonel Volkov, please," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Specialist Johnson is adhering to the strict protocols of the Tomb Guard. No disrespect is intended. It is the highest form of honor they can show, unwavering devotion to their duty." Volkov wheeled on her, his eyes blazing. "Honor? Devotion?" he spat, dismissing her with a wave of his hand. "This is not honor. This is arrogance. This is a child's pantomime of a soldier." He turned back to Liam, his voice rising to a shout. I will not be ignored by a porcelain doll." He then switched to Russian, a torrent of sharp, guttural insults directed at his adjutant, but meant for everyone to feel. Major Diaz, understanding every word, visibly flinched. He was calling Liam a hollow puppet, a disgrace to the profession of arms. The crowd murmured, the tension escalating toward a flashpoint. General Reed took a half-step forward, his hand clenching slightly at his side, his calm demeanor finally showing a crack. Chloe Evans adjusted her camera, zooming in, knowing this was the critical moment. Volkov, lost in his rage, seemed to come to a decision. His eyes fell to the medals on his own chest. His hand went to one in particular, a weathered bronze piece, its red and black ribbon frayed. The medal for courage. He had earned it in the rubble of Aleppo for pulling 3 of his men from a collapsed building under sniper fire. It was his most prized possession, a symbol of what he considered real sacrifice, real valor. He wants to stand for honor, Volkov declared to the plaza. Then I will give him a taste of what real honor looks like. The honor of a soldier, not a statue. Before Major Diaz or anyone else could react, Volkov closed the final few feet between them. The crowd gasped. With a swift, aggressive movement, he unpinned the medal for courage from his own uniform. Then, in a shocking violation of personal space and military decorum, he reached out and roughly pinned the medal onto the shoulder epaulette of Liam's pristine black uniform. The act was an invasion. It was a defilement. The weight of the foreign medal on his shoulder felt like a searing brand to Liam. The metallic clink of the pin piercing the fabric was the only sound in the suddenly silent plaza. It was an insult of the highest order, a physical imposition of one man's will upon another's sacred duty. Volkov stepped back, a triumphant, ugly smirk on his face, believing he had finally forced a reaction, finally broken the unbreakable American. He had, but not in the way he expected. For a heartbeat, the world remained frozen. The Russian medal, a bronze stain on the perfect black of Liam's uniform, seemed to suck all the air from the plaza. Chloe Evans's live stream captured the collective shock on the faces in the crowd. Volkov's smirk was one of victory, the look of a man who had successfully smashed a priceless piece of art just to prove he could. Then Liam moved. The motion was not born of anger or panic. It was fluid, precise, and imbued with an almost terrifying calm. It was the economy of movement drilled into him by years of repetition, a physical manifestation of his iron will. His white-gloved left hand rose from his rifle in a clean, deliberate arc. His fingers did not fumble. They closed around the foreign medal with surgical precision. He did not look at it. He did not look at Volkov. His gaze remained locked on that distant, unseen point. With the same unhurried grace, he unpinned the medal from his shoulder. He held it for a fraction of a second between his thumb and forefinger, suspended in the air. Then he simply let it go. The weathered bronze medal fell. It hit the marble plaza with a sharp, distinct clink-clatter, the sound echoing with shocking clarity in the dead silence. It spun for a moment, the sun glinting off its surface, before settling face up on the ground between the 2 men, a symbol of honor, now discarded. And then the sentinel spoke. For the first time in his hours-long watch, Liam Johnson's voice cut through the air. It was not a shout, not a whisper, but a clear, resonant baritone, devoid of any emotion, yet carrying the immense weight of his office. "Sir," he stated, his voice projecting across the plaza, "touching a tomb guard or placing any item on their person is a violation of protocol." He paused, letting the words sink in. "I must request that you step back from the line and respect my duty." The effect was electric. The crowd, which had been holding its breath, let out a collective gasp. Volkov's triumphant smirk evaporated, replaced by a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. His face contorted, the scar above his eye turning a livid white. To be defied was one thing. To be so calmly, so publicly, so thoroughly dismantled was another entirely. You dare!" he roared, his voice cracking with rage. He took an aggressive step forward, his hand balling into a fist. "You will pick that up. You will apologize for insulting the Russian Federation, or by God, I will. That is enough, Colonel. The voice was not loud, but it possessed a quality of command that sliced through Volkov's rage like a surgeon's scalpel. General Marcus Reed had moved from the edge of the plaza, his steps measured and silent. He now stood slightly to the side, positioning himself between Volkov and Liam. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The sheer force of his presence was enough to make the furious Russian Colonel freeze mid-threat. "This has gone on long enough," General Reed said, his steel-gray eyes locking onto Volkov's. "You and I are going to have a conversation. Now." General Reed's intervention shifted the very atmosphere of the plaza. He radiated an authority that transcended rank and nationality, the quiet power of a man who had seen everything and feared nothing. He gave a slight nod to Major Diaz, who immediately began directing security to create a wider perimeter, moving the onlookers back. Chloe Evans reluctantly lowered her camera, recognizing that the public spectacle was over, but she kept recording audio, sensing the real story was just beginning. Reed gestured toward a quiet, shaded alcove near the museum's towering columns. "Colonel Volkov, walk with me." It was not a request. Volkov, his chest still heaving with residual anger, hesitated for a moment. He looked from the immovable guard to the unyielding general. Some of the fight seemed to drain out of him, replaced by a grudging compliance. He gave a curt nod and followed Reed, his boots scraping the marble where his medal still lay. Once they were out of earshot of the main crowd, Reed stopped and turned to face the Russian. "Colonel," he began, his voice low and even, "you speak of honor. You speak of what it means to be a real soldier. You believe that young man out there is a statue, a symbol with no substance. He is a disgrace," Volkov bit out. "He stands there while real soldiers fight and die." "Does he?" Reed's eyes narrowed, a flicker of something cold and hard in their depths. "Let me tell you about a real soldier, Colonel. Let me tell you about Sergeant Ben Miller." At the name, Volkov's dismissive posture faltered slightly. The name was unfamiliar, yet the general's tone demanded his attention. "The year was 2009. Reed continued, his voice a low, steady cadence, painting a picture with his words. "Kandahar Province, Afghanistan. A joint humanitarian convoy was on a supply run to a remote village. It was a mission of peace, but peace is a fragile thing in that part of the world." Reed paused, his eyes boring into Volkov's. "Your unit was providing security alongside an American platoon. You were in the lead vehicle when the IED detonated." The color began to drain from Volkov's face. The scar above his eye seemed to pulse. He remembered. The world-shattering blast, the searing heat, the screams, the suffocating smell of burning diesel and flesh. "Your BTR-80 was flipped on its side, the engine ablaze." Reed went on, his memory photographic, his details precise. "Your leg was pinned. The ammunition inside was cooking off. Your men were either dead, wounded, or suppressed by heavy machine gun fire from a ridge. You were trapped in a burning coffin, Dmitri." Using his first name was a deliberate, piercing strike. Volkov's mouth opened, but no sound came out. "No one could get to you. It was a death sentence," Reed said, his voice softening slightly, but losing none of its intensity. But one American soldier disobeyed a direct order to hold his position. He ran through open fire, armed with nothing but a pry bar and a fire extinguisher. He was a sergeant from the 3rd Infantry, the old guard. His name was Ben Miller. Reed leaned in closer. He wrenched the damaged hatch open. He ignored the flames licking at his own uniform as he pulled you, an unconscious Russian colonel, from that wreckage. Just as he dragged you clear, a secondary explosion from the vehicle sent a wave of shrapnel across the kill zone. Miller shielded your body with his own. The general stood straight, his voice thick with emotion. Sergeant Miller took 17 pieces of that shrapnel in his back and legs. He saved your life, Colonel, but he never made it home to his own family. He died 2 days later at the hospital in Bagram. Reed let the silence hang for a long moment. Then he delivered the final, devastating blow. "Specialist Liam Johnson," he said, gesturing back toward the plaza where Liam still stood, a silent, unmoving guardian, was Sergeant Miller's best friend, his brother in arms. He was there that day, and every single day when he stands guard at the tomb of the unknown soldier, he is not just guarding a monument. He is standing for the memory of men like Ben Miller, men who give everything for everyone, even for a man whose name they don't know. Volkov stared, his face a canvas of shock, shame, and dawning, horrified understanding. The arrogant colonel was gone, replaced by a man stripped bare by a truth he had long forgotten. The revelation struck Dmitry Volkov with the force of a physical blow. He staggered back a step, leaning against a cool marble column for support. The plaza, the symposium, the political posturing, it all faded into an insignificant haze. All he could see was the ghost of a memory, a young, determined American face, grimacing through the smoke and flames, pulling him towards safety. He had never known his name. He had never known his sacrifice. General Reed watched him, allowing the weight of the past to settle. His silence wasn't disrespect, Colonel, he said softly. It was devotion, the highest form he knows. Without another word, Reed turned and walked back toward the museum entrance, leaving Volkov alone with his thoughts. After a long moment, the Russian colonel straightened up. The arrogance was gone, his military bearing replaced by a heavy solemnity. He walked back out onto the sunlit plaza. His aides started toward him, but he waved them off. He walked past them, past Major Diaz, and stopped directly in front of Liam Johnson, leaving a respectful distance. He looked at the young soldier, but this time, he saw something entirely different. He saw the legacy of the man who had saved him. He saw the quiet, unbreakable strength of a promise kept. Then, Volkov did something that stunned the remaining onlookers. He drew himself to full attention. He did not salute. Instead, he placed his right hand flat over his heart, a profound Russian gesture of the deepest respect and sincerity. He held the position for a long, silent moment, his eyes locked on Liam's. Then he gave a slow, deep bow from the waist. He turned, bent down, and picked up his medal for courage from the marble. He clutched in his fist and walked away without looking back. Chloe Evans's story, complete with the video of the confrontation and the final, silent gesture of respect, went viral. It sparked a global conversation online, not about politics, but about a shared code of honor that transcends flags and borders. A week later, a solitary figure in a civilian suit stood before the tomb of the unknown soldier at Arlington National Cemetery. Dmitry Volkov placed a bouquet of red carnations at the base of the tomb. He stood for a long time, watching the new guard pace his 21 steps with flawless, rhythmic precision. And back at his post, whether at the tomb or on a sun-scorched plaza, Specialist Liam Johnson continued his watch. He stood for the fallen. He stood for the living. He stood for the bridges built not with words, but in the profound, unwavering silence of honor. What does true honor mean to you? Share your thoughts in the comments. Please be respectful to all opinions. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that matter.